Welcome to Section 5, Active Directory. In this section, we'll do an overview of the roles of Active Directory. We'll spend some time installing Active Directory domain services and promoting a server into a domain controller. Then we'll take a look at managing organizational units and Active Directory users and groups. We'll take some time joining servers to the domain, and then we'll do a brief overview of group policy, what it is, how to create a simple policy, and how to apply it to an organizational unit. Now, you may hear just referred to as Active Directory instead of a specific role here, and that's because prior to recent versions of Windows Server, Active Directory meant what is essentially now Active Directory Domain Services. That's the centralized management for network objects, so your users and groups and so forth. Since then, more features in Windows Server have come under that Active Directory umbrella to create a more fully realized identity solution here. So we do have domain services, which we'll be working the most with during this course. There's also certificate services for creating a PKI infrastructure for encryption, for files, email, network traffic, pretty much anything you need there. Federation services allows you to federate with other organizations so you can provide single sign-on services through your company's Active Directory. Lightweight directory services is more of a application or developer-focused set of tools to allow you to use the data store and directory services of Active Directory without the need for the heavy domain controller and domain infrastructure. And then rights management services allows you to protect access to your documents and email using encryptions. You can grant specific operations to specific user sets to see who can edit, who can print, and who can view your documents. So for the rest of this video, we'll spend time installing and enabling the Active Directory domain services so we have the features required to promote a server to become a domain controller. We'll first walk through the Server Manager console and how to add the features there, and so you can see the additional features that need to be installed along with domain services. We'll walk through that installation in the GUI so you can see all the sub-steps it's performing, and then at the end we'll also promote the server to become the first domain controller on our network. So I am logged back into Lab Server 01. As you can see, if you went through the NIC teaming exercises or routing exercises, I've reverted this machine back. This is a clean install with the same IP address we were previously using at 10.2.0.10. So the first thing we'll do is walk in there and take a look at our IP settings. So you'll see here I've set the IP to the address we were using. This is the same as before. The one change to make here is the preferred DNS server. Now, part of the Active Directory setup process will involve installing the DNS feature and also making this server a DNS server. So we are going to point the DNS directly to this server on the local IP at 127.0.0.1. This is going to break name resolution temporarily on this server and will cause a few, not errors, but warnings as we walk through as it looks for DNS records as it's setting up Active Directory. But after it sets up that DNS server as part of the process, we should be back up and running with a little configuration to point to our external sources. So I will click on OK and exit out of here. And here in the Server Manager, I'm going to click on Manage and Add Roles and Features. You'll see some messages about just a standard, this is what's going to happen when you install roles. We'll do role-based or feature-based installation. We're going to select this server, and then we will select Domain Services. And you can see here, it has to add some additional features in order to work correctly. So it's going to add a bunch of management consoles for group policy and the remote administration tools. These are the same things that are installed if you download them independently on a Windows workstation to manage remote systems. It'd also be if you installed on your Windows workstation, if you installed the remote tools, that's how you could manage a server core installation graphically. You have these same consoles, it's just connecting to a remote machine. So we'll go ahead and allow that. Select the defaults for server roles. And the things to note here, one of the major benefits of Active Directory domain services is that if you set up multiple domain controllers, it will replicate this data across to all of them. So if you lose one, you don't necessarily lose all of your authentication on your network. The other thing to note here is previously mentioned in ADDS requires a DNS server to be installed on the network. So this should see that it's going to prompt us when we get to the next configuration step to install the DNS server role. So I'll go ahead and click next through here. This is a review of what's going on. I'll refrain from clicking restart the server so we can intentionally restart and see what the state is before we do that, if we do actually have to restart. So I'll click install here, and it's going to walk through getting all of these features set up, and I will pause and we'll be right back when that's completed to finish the last step of our domain controller setup. Okay, you'll see that the installation has succeeded, but we do have further configuration required. So I will go ahead and you'll see on the left side here, we now have Active Directory Domain Services as an option. And we can select that option. You'll see again a message that configuration is required. If we click more, you'll see that we have a post-deployment configuration step that has not started, and we need to promote this server to a domain controller. So I'll go ahead and click here. Now this is a brand new Active Directory infrastructure. We don't have forests, we don't have domains under those forests, so we need to start at the top. We will create a new forest, and that will be called pactlab.local. And that'll be the root domain that we'll use for any of the systems that come up here. So go ahead and click next, and it should bring up some options here. Now by default, this is the first in the forest, so we don't have to worry about backwards compatibility. You may have a different functional level if you're adding domain controller into an existing forest. So here we'll just stay with 2016, so we have the most recent features. Now the other thing, we will install the DNS server. We don't have a choice here. As the first and only domain controller, we will hold the global catalog on this system, and then we need a recovery password. If you ever need to go into recovery mode, you can use this password, and that does have to match your complexity requirements, so make sure you're following that. The DNS options, well, they're grayed out here. That'll all get resolved through the end of this. It's going to go ahead and populate the NetBIOS name, which just should be the first part of the domain, so we should see Pact Labs show up here momentarily. There we go. For the paths, we're going to let the database and log files and everything be stored in the defaults. So c:/windows/ntds, and sysvol will stay in c:/windows sysvol. And you can see here we're reviewing all of our options of what we just decided. And if you click View Script down here, you can actually see the PowerShell. So you can copy and paste this and drop that to another server, and you can configure, if you needed to set up another forest, you can do it that way. Now, it's not necessarily going to work for multiple domain controllers, as you'd be using a different command to create a domain controller instead of creating a new forest. But if you do want to save this information, say for recovery purposes, or in this course, if you want to tear down your lab, and you can easily rebuild it with this command set. So I'll go through and hit next, and it's going to check prerequisites. We should see our DNS error come up, and we'll probably see an error about backwards compatibility with NT4. By default, the security settings allow for a weaker level of cryptography. If you're not dealing with any older systems, you can check out this knowledge base article and see about getting that resolved. So these are just notices. They aren't going to harm the installation process. You can see the green check above that the prerequisites passed successfully. So we'll click install. That's going to go ahead and get everything configured to make this the domain controller. Afterwards, it'll reboot and come back as the domain controller, and we need to log in with our domain login. Since this is the first domain controller on our network, it's going to be pulling the local administrator password and using that as the password. So whatever you have entered as the password for this box is now going to be the domain administrator password for any systems that you join to Active Directory. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this. It'll take a few minutes to finish the installation and reboot, and when that comes back, we'll go ahead and wrap up this video. Okay, and we are back from the reboot, and you can see now that the administrator login has been changed from local admin to the domain administrator. So I'll go ahead and enter my password, and this may take a minute as the first time logging in here and making sure all the services are started. Okay, looks like we're logged in again. Still processing a few things, a little sluggish here. So here we are back in the server manager, and you can see that we've changed from a workgroup to a domain. We are on packedlab.local, and from here on out, so now that we have Active Directory installed and we have DNS installed, we'll take a look at what we do from here.